The house was built like a fortress disguised as a palace, all glass and marble and quiet corridors that swallowed sound. Outside, the city glittered with money and movement, but inside, silence ruled, heavy and careful. Alexander Whitmore had designed it that way after the accident, after the doctors stopped using hopeful words and started using careful ones. His daughter Emily lay in the center of that silence, in a room flooded with soft morning light, her body still, her eyes very much alive. Alexander stood just outside her doorway, watching her through the reflection of the glass wall. He had not entered yet. He always waited a moment, steadying himself, because no amount of wealth prepared a man to see his child confined to a wheelchair, her legs unmoving beneath a silk blanket, her once restless energy trapped behind stillness. Emily stared at the window, where birds landed on the railing and took off again, free in ways she no longer was. He stepped inside quietly. "Good morning, sunshine," he said, forcing warmth into his voice. Emily turned her head and smiled, a real smile that always surprised him with its strength. "You're late," she teased. "I thought billionaires controlled time." He laughed softly and kissed her forehead. "I tried. Time refuses to take bribes." Her laugh faded into a thoughtful silence. Alexander knew that look. She was thinking about before, about running down beaches, about dancing barefoot in the kitchen, about the careless life she'd lost when a drunk driver crossed a red light. He hated those moments because he couldn't buy them away. What Emily didn't know was that this house watched itself. Every hallway, every corner, every room except her bedroom and bathroom was observed by hidden cameras, woven into smoke detectors, decorative panels, and light fixtures. Alexander had installed them after the first caregiver quit without explanation, after a vase went missing, after Emily flinched once when a stranger raised their voice. He told himself it was for protection, not control. He told himself he would never spy out of paranoia. Yet every night, alone in his study, he watched. That morning, the new maid arrived. Her name was Sophia. She couldn't have been more than 25, small and unassuming, with dark hair pulled back into a simple braid and eyes that didn't linger on the art or the size of the house. Alexander observed her from the security room as she was shown in by the head of staff. She walked carefully, like someone used to not taking up space. Her resume had been modest. No grand references, no elite agencies. Normally, Alexander would have rejected it immediately. But something about her handwritten note, neat and earnest, asking only for honest work, had made him pause. Sophia was assigned to help during the day, cleaning common areas and assisting Emily when needed, under strict instructions. Alexander watched as she entered Emily's room for the first time, her posture respectful, her movements slow. "Good morning," Sophia said gently. "I'm Sophia. I'll be helping around the house." Emily studied her with quiet intensity, something she'd learned to do since becoming dependent on strangers. "Good morning," she replied. "You don't look scared." Sophia smiled softly. "Should I be? Most people are," Emily said. "Either of me or my father." Sophia shook her head. "I don't see anything scary. I see a room with too much quiet." Alexander frowned slightly at the monitor. That was an unusual thing to say. Emily raised an eyebrow, then laughed, surprised. "I like her," Emily said simply. Throughout the day, Alexander checked the cameras more than usual. He told himself it was routine. He watched Sophia dust shelves, arrange flowers, move carefully around Emily's wheelchair without treating it like fragile glass. She spoke to Emily as if she were whole, as if nothing were missing. No pity in her voice, no forced cheerfulness. Just normal conversation about books, weather, and music. At one point, Emily dropped her sketchbook. Before Alexander could tense, Sophia knelt, picked it up, and placed it back on Emily's lap. Then, without comment, she adjusted the blanket over Emily's legs, her touch gentle and brief. Emily didn't flinch. Alexander leaned back in his chair, unsettled by a strange feeling he couldn't name. That evening, after Sophia had left, Alexander wheeled Emily onto the terrace himself. The sky burned orange and purple, the city humming below. "She's different," Emily said suddenly. "Sophia?" Alexander asked. "Yes. She doesn't look at my chair before she looks at my face." Alexander swallowed. "That's good." Emily turned to him. "Dad, do you watch them?" "The staff." He froze for a fraction of a second, then forced a calm smile. "I make sure you're safe." Emily nodded, accepting the half-truth. "Then watch her carefully. People like her don't last long in places like this." That night, Alexander sat alone in the security room, screens glowing in the dark. He told himself he was just checking routines, ensuring nothing had been overlooked. But his eyes kept returning to the footage from earlier, replaying moments he hadn't noticed before. The way Sophia listened, the way Emily's shoulders relaxed when she was near. He paused the screen on a frame of Sophia standing by the window, sunlight outlining her silhouette. There was something unreadable in her expression, something quiet and resolute. Alexander didn't know it yet, but that quiet would soon shatter the carefully controlled world he had built. The cameras he'd hidden to protect his daughter were about to reveal something he never expected to see, something that would force him to question not only who he trusted, but what he thought he knew about strength, dignity, and love. And this was only the beginning. Morning returned to the house with the same controlled calm, but something beneath it had shifted. Alexander felt it as he walked through the hallway, a faint unease that clung to him like static. He hadn't slept much. The cameras had stayed on longer than usual the night before, his eyes moving from screen to screen, replaying ordinary moments until they no longer felt ordinary. Sophia's quiet presence lingered in his thoughts, and more unsettling than that was the way Emily seemed lighter after only one day. In Emily's room, sunlight spilled across the floor. She was already awake, a pencil tucked between her fingers, sketchbook balanced carefully on her lap. When she heard the soft knock, she looked up, hope flickering in her eyes before she saw it was only her father. "Good morning," she said, masking the disappointment quickly. "Waiting for Sophia?" Alexander asked, trying to sound casual. Emily shrugged. "Maybe. She said she'd bring me tea the way I like it. Not the way everyone else assumes I should like it." Alexander smiled despite himself. "And how is that? Strong. Like it actually has something to say." The door opened a moment later, and Sophia stepped in, carrying a tray. "I hope I remembered correctly," she said, placing the cup within Emily's reach. "2 sugars. No milk." Emily took a sip and closed her eyes in appreciation. "Perfect." Alexander watched the exchange closely. Sophia acknowledged him with a polite nod, nothing more, then turned her attention back to Emily. There was confidence in her movements now, not boldness, but certainty, as if she already understood the unspoken rules of the room. As the morning passed, Emily asked Sophia to stay while she worked on her sketches. Alexander left them alone, though not really alone. In the security room, he pulled up the feed from Emily's sitting area, telling himself it was necessary. Emily sketched in silence for a while, then sighed. "I hate that everyone thinks this chair defines me," she said suddenly. Sophia leaned against the wall, careful not to loom. "Does it?" "It shouldn't," Emily replied. "But it does. To them." Sophia considered this. "Then maybe you need to show them what they're missing." Emily laughed bitterly. "How? By standing up?" "No," Sophia said gently. "By doing something they don't expect." Alexander leaned forward, his attention sharpening. Emily looked thoughtful now, pencil tapping lightly against the page. Later that afternoon, Alexander received a call he couldn't ignore. An emergency meeting downtown. He hesitated, glancing toward the cameras. Emily was in the living room, Sophia nearby, sorting through fresh flowers. Everything looked calm. Too calm. "I'll be back before dinner," he told Emily, kissing her head. "Don't worry," Emily said. "I'll behave." Sophia watched him leave, her expression unreadable. Once the house was quieter, the cameras captured moments Alexander would later replay again and again. Emily asked Sophia to move her closer to the piano, an instrument she hadn't touched since before the accident. "I can't play anymore," Emily said quietly. "My legs used to keep the rhythm." Sophia didn't answer right away. She positioned the wheelchair carefully, then pulled a chair close and sat beside her. "Your hands still work," she said. "And rhythm lives in more than one place." Emily hesitated, then placed her fingers on the keys. The first notes were uncertain, scattered. Her hands trembled. She stopped, breathing hard. "I can't," she whispered. Sophia reached out, then paused, waiting for permission. Emily nodded slightly. Sophia rested her hand lightly over Emily's, not pressing, not guiding, just there. "Try again," she said. This time, the melody formed slowly, fragile but real. The sound filled the room, echoing through the halls. Emily's face tightened, tears spilling freely as she played. Grief and joy tangled together in every note. From miles away, Alexander felt an inexplicable tightening in his chest. When he returned hours later, the house was quiet again. Emily was asleep, her sketchbook open beside her, a rough drawing of a piano and two shadowed figures sketched in charcoal. That night, Alexander went to the security room without hesitation. He skipped past the usual feeds and pulled up the footage from the living room. He watched Emily struggle, watched Sophia's restraint, her patience. He watched the music return to his daughter's life, and with it, something dangerously close to hope. But what unsettled him most wasn't the piano. It was what came after. On another camera, in the hallway outside Emily's room, Sophia stood alone for a moment, her back to the wall. Her shoulders shook, silent tears sliding down her face. She wiped them away quickly, straightened, and returned to her duties as if nothing had happened. Alexander paused the frame, staring at her reflection in the glass. "Who are you?" he whispered. For the first time since the accident, Alexander felt afraid not of losing control, but of what might happen if he finally let it go. The third day began with rain, thin and persistent, tapping against the windows like quiet questions. The house responded by retreating further into itself, curtains drawn halfway, lights softened. Alexander noticed the change immediately. Emily usually loved the rain. She said it made the world feel slower, more honest. But that morning, she sat by the window, her hands folded in her lap, staring at the gray sky with an expression that unsettled him. "Sophia's late," Emily said without turning. Alexander checked his watch. She was 15 minutes late. In any other employee, that would have been unacceptable. Yet he felt a flicker of concern instead of irritation. He said nothing, only nodded, and left the room. In the security room, he rewound the previous night's footage. He hadn't watched it all yet. His finger hovered over the control panel as the screens came alive. He saw Sophia finishing her shift, tidying the kitchen, pausing to look at a framed photo on the wall. Emily standing between Alexander and her late mother, all of them smiling into a brighter past. Sophia's eyes lingered on the image longer than necessary. Then she did something that made Alexander sit up straighter. She took out her phone. Employees weren't allowed to take photos inside the house. It was in the contract, clear and absolute. Alexander watched as Sophia raised the phone, not toward the art, not toward the room, but toward the photograph. She hesitated, lowered it, then finally took a single picture. Immediately afterward, she slipped the phone back into her pocket, her face pale, her breathing uneven. Alexander's jaw tightened. Every instinct screamed breach of trust. He froze the frame, zoomed in. Her expression wasn't greedy or calculating. It was raw, almost broken. The front door camera chimed. Sophia had arrived. Alexander closed the feed and left the room, his mind racing. When he encountered Sophia in the hallway, she stopped immediately. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said. "There was a problem with the bus." He studied her closely. There were dark circles under her eyes. Her hands trembled slightly as she clasped them together. "We'll talk later," he said calmly. Sophia nodded, accepting the unspoken weight of his words. In Emily's room, the atmosphere shifted as soon as Sophia entered. Emily's posture straightened. Her eyes brightened. "You're soaked," Emily said. Sophia smiled faintly. "Rain doesn't bother me." "It should," Emily replied. "You're human." Sophia laughed softly, the sound fragile but real. As the morning went on, Alexander tried to focus on work, but his attention kept drifting back to the cameras. He watched as Sophia helped Emily practice transferring from her wheelchair to the sofa, moving carefully, encouraging without pushing. Emily struggled, sweat forming at her temples. When she faltered, Sophia didn't rush to catch her. She waited, steady, ready but not intervening. "I can do it," Emily insisted through clenched teeth. "I know," Sophia said quietly. Emily succeeded, collapsing onto the sofa, breathless and triumphant. She laughed, a sound that echoed through the room. Alexander's chest tightened painfully at the sound. It had been so long since he'd heard that laugh without an edge of sorrow. Later, in the kitchen, Sophia prepared lunch while Emily rested nearby. The conversation drifted, light at first, then deeper. "Did you always want to do this?" Emily asked. "Care work." Sophia shook her head. No, I wanted to be a physical therapist. Emily turned to her sharply. Wanted. I had to stop school, Sophia said simply. Family things. Emily studied her. You know exactly how much to help. When to step back. Sophia's hands stilled for a moment. I learned the hard way. The rain intensified outside, thunder rumbling in the distance. Alexander felt something cold settle in his stomach. That afternoon, Alexander called Sophia into his study. She stood near the door, hands folded, eyes lowered but not afraid. You broke a rule, he said, his voice even. You took a photograph inside my house. Sophia's breath caught. She looked up, and for a moment, Alexander saw fear flash across her face, followed by resignation. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean any harm. Why? He asked. Sophia hesitated. The silence stretched. Finally, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. With trembling fingers, she opened the gallery and turned the screen toward him. Beside the photo of his family was another image. A young girl in a wheelchair, thinner, paler, her eyes eerily similar to Emily's. My sister, Sophia said quietly. Lucia. She was paralyzed too. After an infection. She died 3 years ago. Alexander felt the air leave the room. She loved art, Sophia continued. She loved music. And when I saw your daughter, I forgot where I was. I just needed to remember. Alexander closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, his anger had dissolved into something heavier, more dangerous, understanding. You should have told me, he said. I was afraid, Sophia replied. People don't like to be reminded of what they could lose. Alexander dismissed her with a nod, his mind in turmoil. That night, alone in the security room, Alexander watched the footage again, this time with different eyes. He saw not an employee crossing boundaries, but a woman carrying grief into a house built on it. Then, on one of the exterior cameras, he noticed something else. A car parked across the street, engine off, headlights dark. It had been there for hours. Alexander leaned forward, unease crawling up his spine. The cameras, once symbols of control, were becoming warnings, and whatever was coming next would test every decision he'd made so far. The car across the street remained the next morning, its presence subtle enough to be ignored by anyone not looking for it. Alexander noticed it immediately. The rain had stopped overnight, leaving the pavement dark and reflective, and the vehicle sat in the same position as before, angled just enough to face the house. He zoomed in on the exterior camera feed, adjusting contrast, enhancing clarity. Tinted windows. No visible plates from this angle that he told himself not to jump to conclusions, yet he couldn't pull his eyes away. Wealth came with attention, some of it harmless, some of it dangerous. Since the accident, he'd learned to assume the worst in the kitchen. Emily laughed at something Sophia had said, the sound drifting faintly through the hall. That laugh anchored him. Whatever threat might be forming outside, he would not allow it to cross that threshold. Alexander joined them for breakfast, his presence shifting the air in the room. Sophia noticed immediately. She always did. She straightened slightly, her eyes flicking toward him, then back to Emily. You didn't sleep, Emily said, studying her father's face. I slept enough, Alexander replied. Emily smiled knowingly. That means no. Sophia set the tea down and excused herself, sensing the unspoken tension. As she moved away, Alexander's gaze followed her, thoughtful, conflicted. Trust did not come easily to him anymore. Yet Sophia had earned something dangerously close to by mid-morning. The car was still there. Alexander made a call. Quiet. Efficient. Within an hour, a private security vehicle passed by slowly, casual enough to look like a neighbor. The car across the street didn't move. Emily noticed his distraction. What's wrong? Nothing. Alexander said too quickly. She tilted her head. That's what you say when it's something. Before he could respond, a sharp noise echoed from the living room. A crash. Glass. Alexander was on his feet instantly. The cameras pulled up automatically on his tablet. A framed mirror lay shattered near the entryway. Emily sat frozen in her wheelchair, eyes wide. Sophia stood between her and the broken glass, arms spread protectively. I'm sorry, Sophia said quickly. I tripped. Alexander rushed in, scanning Emily for injuries. Are you hurt? Emily shook her head. She pushed me back before it fell. Sophia's hands trembled as she gathered a broom. I didn't mean. It's fine, Alexander said sharply. Leave it. I'll have someone clean this. Sophia looked at Emily, guilt heavy in her eyes. Emily reached out and took her hand. It's just a mirror. But Alexander had seen the footage already. Sophia hadn't tripped. She'd noticed something Emily hadn't. A faint reflection in the mirror just before it fell. The angle, the light. Someone had been outside the door. Watching. The car was gone. That afternoon, Alexander locked down the house. No announcements. No panic. Staff were quietly sent home early. Doors reinforced. Security systems armed to full capacity. Sophia remained by Emily's side. I should go, Sophia said once the house grew unnaturally quiet. No, Emily said immediately. Stay. Alexander hesitated, then nodded. Stay. As evening fell, the house felt like it was holding its breath. Alexander watched the monitors from the security room, every shadow suspicious, every flicker of movement scrutinized. He caught glimpses of Sophia moving through the halls, always close to Emily, always aware in Emily's room. Sophia helped her prepare for bed. The routine was gentle, practiced now. As Sophia brushed Emily's hair, Emily spoke softly. You saved me today. Sophia shook her head. I reacted. You always do, Emily said. Before things happen. Sophia met her gaze in the mirror. Sometimes pain teaches you to listen to the world more closely. Emily studied her reflection. Did your sister ever feel trapped? Sophia swallowed. Every day? Until she found small ways to be free. Emily smiled faintly. Maybe I can too. A soft alert sounded in Alexander's ear. Motion detected. Backyard perimeter. He was moving before the sound finished, pulling up the feed. A figure stood near the garden wall, partially obscured by trees. Another alert chimed. Front side yard .2. Alexander's pulse hammered. He grabbed the phone and issued a silent alert to his security team. Estimated arrival. 8 minutes. Too long that he spoke calmly into the house intercom. Emily, lock the door. Stay inside. Emily's eyes widened. Dad, do it now. Sophia was already moving, locking the door, positioning Emily behind the bed. Her expression was focused, sharp. What's happening? Emily whispered. Sophia crouched in front of her. Listen to me. No matter what you hear, you stay here. Do not move. Emily reached for her hand. Don't leave. I won't, Sophia said firmly. The hallway cameras showed shadows moving closer. One of the figures tested a side door. Another circled toward the back. Alexander's voice came through the intercom again, lower now. Sophia, take Emily into the bathroom. There's a reinforced panel behind the shower wall. You'll be safe there. Sophia nodded, already guiding Emily forward. As they moved, a loud bang echoed through the house. Glass shattered somewhere below. Emily gasped. Sophia pushed her into the bathroom, closing the hidden panel just as footsteps thundered outside the bedroom door. Alexander watched in horror and awe as Sophia positioned herself in front of the panel, standing tall, unarmed, resolute. The cameras captured everything. The door handle rattled violently. And in that moment, Alexander realized the cameras he'd hidden to protect his daughter were now witnessing something far greater than a threat. They were revealing who would risk everything to stand between danger and the person she loved, and the night was far from over. The sound of sirens came faint at first, distant and unsure, like a promise that might still be broken. Inside the house, time stretched into sharp, fragile seconds. The bedroom door shuddered again under another blow, the wood cracking near the lock. Sophia didn't move. Her body stood between the danger and the hidden panel, her breathing slow, controlled, every sense alive. Behind the wall, Emily pressed her hand to her mouth to keep from crying out. Her heart thundered so loudly she was certain it could be heard. She had never felt so helpless, not even on the day of the accident. Then, she had lost her legs. Tonight, she was afraid she might lose someone who had taught her she was still hold in the security room. Alexander's hands shook as he watched. Money, influence, power, none of it mattered now. The screen showed a truth he couldn't interrupt. He issued commands to security again, his voice calm despite the terror ripping through him. Hold them. Police are en route. Another crash echoed, closer this time. The bedroom door gave way, splintering inward. 2 men entered, faces masked, movements urgent and reckless. One raised a weapon, scanning the room. Sophia didn't scream. She didn't plead. She stepped forward. There's nothing here, she said clearly. Leave. The men laughed, sharp and ugly. One grabbed her arm, shoving her aside. She hit the wall hard, pain exploding through her shoulder, but she stayed on her feet. When the second man moved toward the bathroom, Sophia reacted without thinking. She lunged, grabbing the edge of a shattered mirror frame still lying on the floor from earlier. Blood slicked her palm as she swung blindly, striking his arm that he shouted, stumbling back. The noise was deafening. Chaos filled the room. Emily screamed behind the panel, unable to stay silent anymore. That sound changed everything. Sophia turned toward the panel instinctively, and the first man followed her gaze. His eyes narrowed. "Move," he snarled, raising the weapon again. Sophia stepped in front of the panel, arms wide, shaking but unyielding. "You'll have to go through me." For a split second, something human flickered in the man's eyes. Then it was gone. The gunshot never came. Instead, the door burst open again, this time under the force of armed guards. Shouts filled the room. The intruders were tackled, restrained, dragged away as sirens wailed just outside the gates. Sophia collapsed to the floor, the mirror shard clattering from her hand. Her vision blurred, pain and relief crashing together. She felt hands on her shoulders, voices calling her name. Sophia. Alexander was there, kneeling in front of her, his expression stripped bare of wealth, authority, and distance. He was just a father who had almost lost everything. "You're safe," he said, his voice breaking. "It's over." Behind him, the panel slid open. Emily emerged, tears streaming freely. She didn't wait. She wheeled herself forward with fierce determination, reaching Sophia just as Alexander helped her sit up. Emily took Sophia's bloodied hand without hesitation. "You stayed," she whispered. "You didn't leave." Sophia smiled weakly. "I promised." Police lights bathed the room in red and blue. Statements were taken. The house buzzed with activity again, but something fundamental had changed. The threat was gone, yet the air felt heavier, reverent. Later, long after the intruders had been taken away and the staff dismissed, the house fell quiet once more. Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, her shoulder bandaged, exhaustion etched into every line of her face. Alexander stood near the window, staring out at the now empty street. "They were hired," he said finally, "to gather information, to see if the house was vulnerable." Sophia nodded slowly. "They thought no one would notice." He turned to her. "You noticed everything." Silence settled between them, thick with meaning. Alexander inhaled deeply. "The cameras," he said. "I installed them to protect my daughter, to control what I couldn't bear to lose." Emily watched him closely. "They showed me something I didn't expect," he continued. "That protection doesn't always come from walls, or money, or watching everything from a distance." He looked at Sophia, his eyes shining. "It comes from people who choose to stand still when everyone else would run." Sophia looked down. "I didn't think. I just remembered my sister. And how many times I wish someone would have stood where I stood tonight." Emily reached out and placed her hand over Sophia's heart. "She did," she said softly. "Through you." The days that followed brought change, quiet and profound. The cameras remained, but Alexander watched them less. Emily began physical therapy again, not because she believed she would walk tomorrow, but because she believed in tomorrow at all. Sophia stayed, not as a maid, but as something undefined, something earned. One afternoon, sunlight filled the living room as Emily sat at the piano. Her hands moved with confidence now, the melody rich and fearless. Sophia sat nearby, listening. Alexander stood behind them, unseen, tears sliding freely down his face. He finally understood. The cameras had captured fear, danger, sacrifice. But what they truly revealed was not what the maid did, or even what his daughter survived. They revealed love that asked for nothing, courage that didn't announce itself, and strength that didn't need to stand to be unbreakable. And for the first time since the accident, Alexander turned off the screens, not because he was no longer afraid, but because he trusted what the cameras had shown him. The house was no longer a fortress. It was a home.